After 50 years of bottled-up anger, I discovered the unbelievable power of forgiveness. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. One minute I was living my life, and the next, I was staring into the abyss of my past. A haze of regret hung in the air. I could taste the bitterness lingering on my tongue. My heart raced, pounding like a drum, echoing the chaos inside me. That morning, I received the letter. A worn, yellowed envelope that somehow felt alive in my trembling hands. The address was scrawled in a shaky hand, and I instantly recognized it. Memories flooded back, sharp as broken glass. It was from my estranged brother, Richard. I hadn't spoken to him in 20 years. The anger coursed through me, hot and relentless, as I tore it open, my hands shaking with anticipation and dread. The words leapt off the page. He was sick. Terminally ill. I choked back tears, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Rage bubbled just beneath the surface. How dare he come back into my life now? The silence between us had been a shield, protecting me from the pain of betrayal. But now, it felt more like a prison. I felt suffocated, like I was drowning in memories of our childhood, the laughter, the fights, the promises we had broken. As I paced the room, I could almost hear Richard's laughter ringing in my ears, the warmth of his smile haunting me. I was standing on the edge, teetering between the longing for reconciliation and the heavy weight of resentment. My heart ached, a tight knot in my chest. Something was rising within me, a primal urge to scream, to cry, to shake the walls of the silence that surrounded us. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling. I had spent 50 years caging my anger, letting it breed like a virus. But now, I was faced with a choice. Should I let go? Or should I hold on to the pain? My emotions twisted inside me like vines wrestling for escape. I could picture him sick and frail, alone in a sterile hospital room. Did I really want to keep him there, locked away in my heart, forever a ghost of my past? Time seemed to stretch. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Each second felt like a lifetime. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized I didn't know if I wanted to forgive him or if I wanted to storm into that room and unleash every hurt word I'd kept bottled inside. A rush of urgency surged through me. I was at a crossroads, and the weight of this decision felt like an anchor dragging me deeper and deeper. As I stood there, caught between my past and an uncertain future, I felt a flicker of hope. What if? What if forgiveness was the release I had been searching for all my life? Could I really step into that hospital room and face my brother after all these years? The thought was terrifying, exhilarating, the chance to finally let go of the hurt. But what if he had changed? What if it was too late? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The car ride felt like an out-of-body experience, my hands clenching the steering wheel, the world racing by in a blur. Each moment was a pulse of anxiety, reminding me that instead of driving away from my past, I was heading straight into it. I could almost hear the echo of my mother's voice, calling Richard's name, and the muffled memories of family gatherings that had become whispers in the years of silence. As I pulled into the hospital parking lot, my heart thudded with a rhythm that matched the sirens blaring somewhere in the distance. Shadows of guilt danced in my mind. I had avoided this for far too long. My throat felt tight as I stepped out, the sterile air prickling against my skin. The idea of facing him fluttered in my stomach like a restless bird. Each step inside felt as if I were trudging through a thick fog, laden with uncertainty. I had recalled all too vividly the last conversation we had, a bitter argument that had turned us into strangers. Now, here I was, a lifetime of unresolved emotions collapsing onto this moment. I stood at the reception desk. The clerk looked up, her tired eyes softened with a hint of understanding. Visiting someone? She asked gently. My brother, I whispered, my voice trembling. Richard, she nodded, her expression shifting to empathy. Room 312. Go through the elevators, take a left. That I blinked back, tears as I made my way down the corridor, each section of blank walls a reminder of the distance we had traveled apart, not just physically, but emotionally, too. The distracting sounds of beeping machines and distant voices faded as I approached his room. A deep breath steadied me, but the heaviness in my chest remained, a reminder of the hurt I had kept hidden. The door opened with a quiet creak. There he was, thin and frail, lying against crisp white sheets, looking more a shadow of the man I remembered than the brother who had laughed with me until we cried just 2 decades ago. His hair was patchy, and the pallor of his skin made him appear almost ethereal. I was overcome by the mix of sympathy and residual anger that twisted inside me, threatening to spill over. Richard, I breathed, stepping inside. His eyes, once bright with mischief and warmth, looked up at me, a flicker of recognition morphing into an expression of vulnerability that seemed to cut through layers of resentment. Liz, he croaked. The sound of my name on his lips sent a rush of conflicting emotions coursing through me. I had spent years trying to erase him from my life, and yet, here I was, clinging to the edges of our fractured history. As I hesitated near the end of his bed, I could see the effort it cost him to smile, the corners of his mouth quirking up barely. I never thought you'd come, it's complicated. My voice quivered, fraught with the weight of all we'd lost. That he gestured weakly for me to sit. I perched on the edge of the chair, barely able to look at him directly, as if he held the power to unearth all the emotions I had buried. I'm sorry for everything, he said, his voice a whisper, barely escaping his lips. I've spent my last months thinking about you. About us. The pause that followed felt like a void between us, thickening the air with the stories unsaid and sentiments unshared. My anger warred against the tenderness of his apology. I clenched my fists, torn between the desire to embrace the brother I once cherished and the instinct to pull away, to shield myself from the wound still fresh. Then, a soft knock interrupted the moment. A nurse entered, bringing with her a simple bouquet of flowers. The vibrant colors stood stark against the drab hospital surroundings. Richard, look what I found outside, she smiled, placing the blooms on his bedside table. This one's for you, and a little sunshine for your visitor. I couldn't help but smile, the sunlight creeping in through the window, breaking through the clouds that had overshadowed us. The nurse's kindness nudged a glimmer of hope inside me. Perhaps, this was a moment to build from, a flicker of warmth amidst the embers of my stormy heart. Liz, Richard's voice drew me back to reality. Please, I want to explain. Before he could finish, the door opened again and a heavily breathing figure stepped in. I froze, my breath hitching. Behind him stood my estranged sister-in-law, Eleanor, a woman I hadn't encountered since the fallout. Liz? She breathed, wide-eyed and equally stunned. I didn't expect, but my attention turned back to Richard. A sudden realization twisted my gut. Had she known that the letter was sent intentionally, to force a reunion? The corners of my mind began to churn like a storm as I absorbed the shift in the room, the tension exploding with questions left unasked. What was going on? As Richard's gaze flickered between Eleanor and me, uncertainty hung in the air, not just for the fractured bonds of family, but for secrets yet to be revealed. A new tide of emotions surged, threatening to drown me once again. Now, the stakes felt infinitely higher. What truths lay in wait that could either break us further or, perhaps, finally bind us together? As the silence deepened, the weight of Eleanor's presence bore down on the hospital room's fragile atmosphere. I could see in Richard's eyes the flicker of pain and uncertainty that matched my own. What secrets had he shared with her? The tension felt suffocating, wrapping around me like a thick blanket, stifling any chance we had of moving forward. Liz, Eleanor said, her voice steadying, I've been trying to reach you. I learned Richard was in the hospital and wanted to be here for him, for you both. 1,000 thoughts cascaded through my mind, each one a reminder of the years spent in silence, the severed ties that shaped our relationship into a shadow of what it once had been. Did she even understand the complexity of our estrangement? The anger bubbled again, but I fought to keep it at bay. This wasn't the moment for a confrontation, and yet it felt like the perfect opportunity to let the past bleed into the present. You didn't have to come, I replied, sending a glance at Richard, who suddenly looked smaller, lost in his own skin. What do you know about the situation? Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes softening with concern. I know that this isn't easy. That you and Richard have a lot to unearth. But I also know that he needs us both right now. Richard shifted under the sheets, his voice barely a murmur. I never wanted to push you away, Liz. I didn't think. His words faltered, and I could see the toll that this moment was taking on him. The fire that had simmered between us was now a flicker, desperately yearning for breath. That I just want to understand, I said, focusing on Eleanor and avoiding Richard's gaze. Why now? Why didn't you reach out sooner? The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation but also loaded with curiosity. The warmth of the nurse's gesture had sparked a glimmer of hope, but uncertainty swirled like a tempest, threatening to drown it. That I didn't think you'd want to hear from me, Liz, Eleanor replied, her voice laced with remorse. Richard needed space, and I respected that. I thought I believed he could find his way back to you on his own, without me interfering, and now? I challenged, my heartbeat quickening. You think barging in here is going to solve anything? Please. Richard's weak voice interjected, his eyes pleading. Let's not turn this into another fight. That I drew a shaky breath, gazing at the flowers scattered across the desk, their vibrant colors contrasting starkly against the sterile background of hospital life. They somehow reminded me of what we had lost: our laughter, our shared memories. At once, the memory of our childhood flooded back, summertime afternoons spent laughing in the sun, the warmth of family guiding us through the shadows. Could we resurrect that? Or had those moments become relics, too distant to reclaim? As I glanced back at Richard, I noticed his fingers twitching on the blanket, a subtle sign of an internal struggle. Our eyes met, and for the first time, there was no anger, just an understanding that this moment was pivotal. Regardless of Eleanor's presence or the bitterness that lingered, we were both here, facing the shards of our broken family. Eleanor's voice broke the silence again. I wanted to protect him from more pain, from the baggage of our past. But I see now that, perhaps I was wrong. Home familia shouldn't come with conditions, and neither should healing. Struck by her words, I felt the veil of animosity starting to lift. For a split second, the shadows shifted, and I could see the light beyond them. So you think that we can just what? Forgive and forget? Like nothing happened? It won't be easy, she said softly, her gaze cast down, as if unraveling her own regrets. But what's the alternative? A lifetime more of this? A lifetime. The word lingered at the edge of my consciousness, echoing the whispers of time lost in bitterness. In that moment, I realized that the potential for reconciliation was flickering just as the lights overhead buzzed fitfully. Whether it was too late for Richard or me, I didn't know. Richard tried to interrupt the brewing storm of emotions radiating from Eleanor. You both need to understand. I'm not just sick, but a new wave of panic rushed in, threatening to drown out his words. A crashing sound echoed outside the door, swiftly followed by frantic footsteps. My heart raced as a group of nurses rushed past, their expressions urgent, faces knitted in worry. Eleanor's attention diverted to the door, while I turned back to Richard. Stay with me, I urged, gripping his hand. Please. But as I watched the light in his eyes flicker again, a nurse rushed into the room, panic in her voice. We have a situation. We need to move him now. I turned toward Richard, confusion and fear gripping my heart. What's happening? His expression twisted through pain as he looked between us, uncertainty reflecting in his eyes. Don't move. The nurse's shout cut through my thoughts, my heart dropping as they prepared to wheel him away. And just like that, everything I had feared came rushing back: loss, estrangement, and the haunting reminder of our unresolved past. The reality of what lay ahead loomed large, and I stood at the precipice, teetering on the edge of a decision that might change everything. Would this be the last time I saw him, the last chance for forgiveness I had been waiting for? Or was this just the beginning of a struggle that could ultimately fracture us more? As they wheeled him out, his gaze met mine, a mix of hope and terror. The door swung shut behind them, the sound echoing in the silence, leaving Eleanor and me standing there, stranded in the aftermath of our emotional turmoil, and just like that, I realized the most shocking revelation. I was forced to confront not just Richard's mortality but the depths of my own unresolved feelings. Whatever lay ahead, I was now armed with the choice to reconcile the past, but first, I had to wrestle with the profound fear of losing what was just beginning to heal. The hospital room closed in around me, a constricting space filled with memories I had sought to escape and yet somehow craved in the midst of chaos. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered above, creating a backdrop to the shifting emotions that flooded back as Eleanor stood motionless beside me, the silence between us weighing heavier than the unsaid words clinging to the air. "Liz," she began tentatively, her voice breaking through my haze, "we need to talk about this, about everything." "About what?" I snapped, more sharply than I intended. Anger rippled through me, combined with fear. "About how you stood by while Richard and I fell apart. About how you think you can waltz back into our lives with a simple apology." "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she replied, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm just asking for a chance to help him to help us." The knot in my chest tightened, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Richard had always been the beacon in our fractured family, and now was the one who needed saving. I glanced toward the door through which he had been taken. The void he left behind felt more cavernous than ever. To think I could have reconciled so much earlier if only the past hadn't tethered us in pain. Eleanor reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. "You're not alone in this. I've suffered too, Liz. We all have. But we can still find a way to navigate it together. After all these years." I attempted to pull away, but her grip was firm. "You think it's that easy? You think the words dissolved on my tongue as her eyes held mine, fierce yet vulnerable. I saw the glimmer of resolve in her gaze, a determination that felt strangely like hope. There was a truth in what she was saying. Whether we liked it or not, our lives were now irrevocably intertwined. And in that moment, I could almost believe that breaking bread with the past was possible. But I was raw, and everything felt too precarious. "What if it's too late?" I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "Then we owe it to ourselves to try," she said softly, letting out a breath. Even if it feels impossible, the weight of her words hung between us like a bridge, frail yet alive, urging me to step forward. Was there power in forgiveness, even if I wasn't sure I was ready? Against the swell of uncertainty, fragments of memories gently surfaced: a picture of Richard's laughter, the time he carried me when I twisted my ankle, the promises we had once made about never letting go. They flickered like fireflies in my heart, a desperate flicker against the dark. Turning back toward the door, I grasped the handle and took a step. Eleanor's touch steadied me. I felt a shiver of kinship that I had not anticipated. Perhaps this moment meant more than just revisiting the past. It could be about reclaiming our future, whatever that meant. That we paced toward the nurse's station where a flurry of activity occurred. I could see their hurried movements through the glass. An ache spread through me. Questions bombarded my mind. Was Richard okay? Had they been able to stabilize him? "Excuse me." I called out to a nurse zipping by, her face a mask of urgency. "What is going on with Richard?" I prepared myself for the worst. "He's stable for now," she replied swiftly, moving her hands over a clipboard without once looking up. "The doctors are running some additional tests to ensure everything's under control." Stable for now. Those words clung like an unshed tear, an elusive safety net over an abyss of uncertainty. I turned back to Eleanor, who leaned closer as we caught our breath, her presence grounding me. "Let's find solace in the now," she said, her voice low. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Holding on to that thought, I nodded, but a chilling sense of panic gnawed at my insides. Encased in this vigorous machine of life or death, we were but pieces on a chessboard. The doctors could be facing their own battles, unable to guarantee our desired outcome. What if he... I began, the words quaking at the precipice of possibility. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd at the station, sending an electric thrill of fear spiraling up my spine. I turned instinctively, the gathering nurses suddenly frozen. I found myself looking down the corridor, my heart plummeting as another series of rushed footsteps echoed down the hall. This time a flurry of doctors approached, faces grave and mouths set in grim lines. "Please no," I urged under my breath, wrapping my arms around myself as shadows danced around me. My heart raced, pounding a desperate beat that echoed my worst fears. "Please let this not be the moment." I had to confront the darkness again. Eleanor's hand found mine, catching me just as I began to spiral. "Whatever happens," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "We'll do it together." But before I could reply, the lead doctor reached us, and every breath felt like an anchor pulling me beneath the waves of dread. His face was serious, and he cleared his throat, setting a painful crack in the fragile bond we had just begun to strengthen. "Miss Hart," he addressed me, his eyes unwavering yet compassionate. It felt like my world was teetering on an edge, and as he opened his mouth to speak, an agonizing chill settled within me. The heaviness of what was to come felt insurmountable, and in that moment, reality struck. I would have to confront the possibility of losing Richard for good, his absence surely leaving behind a void no apology could ever fill. The doctor's gaze bore into mine, each second stretching thin as time hung suspended. I could feel Eleanor's grip tightening around my hand, her warmth contrasting sharply with the cold dread pooling in my chest. "Miss Hart," he began, his voice steady but laced with an edge that polarized everything within me. "I need to talk to you about your brother's condition." My heart lurched, as though trying to flee my body. "Is he?" The words caught in my throat like jagged glass, shards of bitterness cut me every time I thought of Richard. He had always been the anchor amidst the turmoil. Without him, I feared I'd surely drift away. The doctor took a breath, and I felt the air around us shift, heavy with the gravity of his next words. "Richard has suffered a severe cardiac event, stable presently, but we need to monitor him closely. He requires a procedure that carries risks, and I cannot guarantee he'll pull through. No. I couldn't restrain my voice from rising. A small wave of shock rippled through the gathering crowd, disapproving glances among nurses whispering unsaid judgments. "You're telling me that he might not." My pleas faded into something strangled, a wordless demand that I couldn't even finish. Eleanor squeezed my hand tighter, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this chaos. "We'll need to think about options," she said softly, her voice steady even though her eyes mirrored my turmoil. I took a breath, remembering Richard's laughter, our childhood escapades, the moments we had shelved away beneath our family's trembling surface. What if he doesn't wake up?" I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, fear clawing at the edges of my resolve. Another shared silence enveloped us as my mind raced through memories mingling with suffering. The years of anger felt trivial in light of the reality looming before me. Though we had lost precious moments, now I feared losing everything. Eleanor stepped closer. "We can't dwell on that now," she said, trying to infuse a flicker of hope into the darkness wrapping around me. "We have to advocate for him. This is Richard. We've fought battles before, haven't we? He might just need us to fight for him again." I wanted to believe her, desperately wanted to believe that hope could still bloom from this desolation. But Richard was not just my brother, he was a testament to every unresolved issue, every regret that had built up like an insurmountable wall over the years. Our family was a garden overgrown with weeds, and he had been the only one who could have helped to prune it back. As we navigated through the shadowed corridors of the hospital, I struggled with an overwhelming sense of urgency. My feet moved by instinct, guided by the instinctual pull of belonging, yet every step left a residue of shame and resentment. I had been too consumed by bitterness to simply be there for him, the doctor continued, outlining the risks and possibilities, but my mind was adrift. I borrowed glances toward the waiting area, absorbing the activity that seemed completely detached from my internal storm. How could life persist with its mundane rhythms while I stood on the precipice of losing someone I couldn't imagine my world without? Once seated, with a tangle of emotions coursing through me, I barely registered the others, arriving a few distant family members, friends from Richard's life outside of ours. Their voices faded into a dull hum, my soul retreating deeper into hopelessness. Just then, a woman approached, her familiar silhouette piercing through my despondence. "Liz." She rushed toward me, her face etched with concern. It was Marissa, a childhood friend from our early days, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The connection felt strained, but I could almost see the familiarity glowing soft beneath the shadow of my burden. I heard about Richard. I'm so sorry. As she enveloped me in a warm embrace, I felt the dam within me splinter. Years of unresolved anger and pain trembled just beneath the surface, threatening to spill out. Part of me wanted to cry out, to unearth every hurt, every lie I had buried in the depths of my heart. But as her tender murmurs of comfort washed over me, a flicker of kindness ignited, reminding me that I was not alone even if it felt dangerously close to breaking. Eleanor's eyes flicked toward me, catching my gaze with a question simmering beneath her own pain. Are you okay? She asked softly. I saw her care, that fierce willingness to stand firmly beside me, but how could I pull myself together for Richard? How could I grapple with the possibility of reconciling years of silence and bitterness in a moment that felt like eternity? Then, just as I found myself teetering on the edge, a loud commotion erupted from the corridor outside. Flashes of bright lights, shouts of emergency calls, and urgently rushing footsteps melded into a cacophony of fears. Something's happening. Marissa exclaimed, her face paling, instinctively shifting between the door and me. I held breath unconsciously, my chest stiffening. Eleanor stood beside me, her eyes wide, mirrors reflecting each other's fears. What's going on? I whispered, dread pooling heavily in my stomach. Before I could quell my rising anxiety, the scene that unfurled before us sent waves of anxiety crashing through the fragile stillness we had just begun to carve. As the commotion mounted, a figure pushed through the doors, clearly disturbed, a doctor wielding news that felt both a portent and a harbinger of doom. I thought I would sink beneath its weight but found myself momentarily frozen, an unwilling participant in whatever tragedy was about to unfold, and in that pregnant moment, the fate of everything I held dear hung in the balance. I could feel myself poised between the looming despair of losing Richard entirely and the agonizing possibility of reconciliation, and yet I was no closer to either in my racing thoughts, one pulsating heartbeat at a time. The doctor stepped into the room, an imposing shadow against the backdrop of harsh fluorescent lights. I held my breath, unsure whether the news he bore would shatter whatever thin vestige of hope remained or offer a flicker of light in our encroaching darkness. My apologies for the disturbance, he began, his tone merely a notch above clinical. We've just admitted a new patient who requires immediate attention, which means we'll be relocating your brother temporarily for preparation of the procedure. Relocation. The word ricocheted around my skull until it collided with the remnants of my sanity. My hand instinctively tightened around Eleanor's, the only anchor I had in a sea of swirling uncertainty. When will he be back? What if something goes wrong? My voice held an edge, each word punctuated by the raw edges of fear and desperation. Your brother's condition remains stable. Everything is in place for him to undergo the necessary procedure. It is, however, best if you wait in the family lounge. They will alert you as soon as he is moved. His voice bore no comfort, merely a procedural tone that felt too clinical to contain our fear. Please. I felt the swell of panic rise in my throat, the knot tightening with each heartbeat. In that moment, I was overwhelmed with the potential loss. Richard had always been my shield against a world that felt harsher than it had to. Losing him suddenly felt as stark as the hospital's fluorescent glow. Eleanor planted her hand on my shoulder, grounding me. We can't catastrophize, she whispered, her voice steady but quiet, like a lone flame flickering against the overwhelming storm. Let's go to the lounge, and we can strategize about what we want to say to him when he's back. As we made our way to a sterile waiting area, my mind raced. Each moment I pondered our childhood, the laughter that had frayed between us, made me ache with regret. I thought of family dinners where conversations had dwindled into awkward silence, of forged barriers no one dared cross. The waiting area was deceptively calm, an oasis of muted colors and soft chairs that threatened to envelop me. Here, away from the chaos of medical bustle, I felt the enormity of the situation wash over me and, for a moment, I froze in place as raw memories surged unbidden. Liz, look, Eleanor said gently, nudging me from my tumultuous thoughts. Across the room, a little girl sat drawing on a notepad, her mother nearby deeply engrossed in her phone. I watched as the child's small fingers moved effortlessly across the page, weaving vibrant colors together with unyielding concentration. A small glimpse of innocence amidst our grief. If sensing my gaze, the little girl turned and grinned at me, a sunny gesture that sent a rush of warmth through my chest. For a fleeting second, I felt the curl of genuine joy, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, glimmers of light could flicker into existence. "Can you see the rainbow?" she called out, her voice crystal clear, color bursting forth like the dawn after a storm. "Yes," I whispered back, even though I wasn't talking about her drawing. A different rainbow unfurled in my heart, an invitation to look beyond the walls I had built. Eleanor smiled softly. "Maybe we can find a way to paint our own one with Richard," she suggested, her eyes reflecting shared determination. But a nagging thought twisted in the pit of my stomach. Just as that child was drawing her rainbow, was I too late to sketch mine? The minutes slithered by, dragging me deeper into contemplation. Each tick of the clock echoed in my mind, a reminder of time slipping through my fingers. When at last the door opened again, it wasn't the doctor who appeared but rather the nurse, her eyes careful but warm. "Miss Hart." She approached us with a mixture of urgency and tenderness. "You can come with me, your brother has been prepped for his procedure." I stood up, the world around me blurring for a brief instant. My heart raced as if to say, "It's now or never." Eleanor grasped my hand tighter, its solid presence bolstering me against the current of fear surging through my veins. In the stark white corridor, we approached Richard's room and I pushed open the door, half expecting to see some reflection of the brother I had thought would always anchor me. Instead, he lay unconscious, so frail and vulnerable. Machines beeped rhythmic lullabies, keeping watch alongside me. Fear danced through the air when I noticed a small piece of folded paper peeking out from his bedside table. Gently, I reached out and unfolded it, recognizing the familiar scrawl, his handwriting. It felt akin to discovering a message sent from the past, a silent reminder of everything left unsaid. "Dear Liz," it began, and with each trembling letter, clarity emerged, leaving me breathless. "I know things have not been easy between us. So much time has passed, and yet." I stopped reading, my heart stuttering as every unspoken word cascaded through me. I didn't know if I was reading a letter of reconciliation or a closure to unresolved anger, but the only thing I knew for sure was that the power of those words had the potential to change everything I thought I understood about my brother, Liz. Eleanor's voice pulled me back to the present, filled with panic as the beeping machines hastened. Alarm bells rang louder, flooding the air with red, and everything solid around me began to splinter, echoing shards of dread clamoring for release. The doctor rushed into the room, urgency pushing him forward as I clutched the letter like a lifeline. "What's happening?" I cried out as a wave of adrenaline coursed through the air. "His heartbeat is faltering." The room dissolved into chaos as the doctor and nurses hurried around Richard. I stood trembling, torn between the overwhelming fear of losing him and the surge of hope that letter hinted at, the conclusion of a journey I had never fitted into. As I turned the letter again in my trembling hands, its significance crackled beneath my fingers. The stakes had dramatically shifted, and I was left dangling between two worlds, one of heart-wrenching loss and the other of hopeful forgiveness. Richard's life steadied in a balance only I seemed aware of, and just then, in that blaring tempest of anxiety, I felt the weight of something awakening within me, desperate, aching need to somehow, against all odds, stitch together the fabric of our broken family. Would there still be time? Would I find the courage to forgive and to heal what had always been frayed? The doctor's voice faded into the background of my mind as I faced what lay ahead, committed to forging my way through the remnants of fear and towards the possibility of redemption or losing it all in a heartbeat. The chaos around me dissipated as I deepened my focus on the reality of the situation. Richard lay vulnerable, trapped in a web of beeping machines, beeping rhythms that matched the frantic pace of my heart. Though the din of urgency flared around us, the world outside seemed to tilt sideways, narrowing to the single thread connecting me to my brother, that letter. "Please take a step back," the doctor urged, the sharpness in his tone fracturing the silence that had gathered in my chest. My feet felt glued to the ground, petrified by uncertainty. I tightened my grip on the letter as if it might dissolve into thin air, like everything else I held dear. Eleanor's concern nestled beside my apprehension, her hand gently squeezing my arm. "Liz, we have to let them work," she whispered, though I could feel the urgency in her voice. He needs us to stay calm. Words danced at the edges of my mind but couldn't find their way to my lips. I was paralyzed by memories and current fear, clawing to maintain balance while the floor of my reality swayed beneath me. Why had we allowed so much to remain unsaid? The threads of resentment that had woven through our sibling bond felt heavy, an anchor that dragged us apart when instead we could have been rich with understanding. One of the nurses caught my eye, her expression a comforting mask of empathy amidst the storm. She moved swiftly but purposefully, adjusting machines while casting sympathetic glances in our direction. I suddenly remembered the little girl who had seen rainbows where I had only seen shadows. Did hope linger there, too quietly waiting to be recognized? Richard's eyes fluttered open momentarily, capturing my attention. In that split second, a rush of emotions washed over me, igniting something I had long buried. "Liz?" he murmured, his voice barely a whisper, laden with a mixture of confusion and strength. Despite the surroundings, it felt as if the world had narrowed down to only the two of us. That I am here, I managed to say, rushing to his side while the doctor continued his work. My heart soared at the sight of him, the mere sound of his voice tearing down walls I hadn't even realized I'd built. "Tu wrote you a letter," I whispered, unable to hold back the tidal wave of feelings cresting over me. "I found your note. It was beautiful." A flicker of recognition ignited in his eyes before a wave of distress passed over his face. "Liz." Before he could gather his thoughts, the machines around him beeped more insistently, cutting through our shared moment. I clenched my jaw, resisting a flood of fear. "Hold on, Richard. Just hold on. You're stronger than this." The words fell from my lips, fervent with prayer. I could hardly believe they were leaving my mouth, words I never thought to voice. But beneath my fingers, the letter crinkled, grounding me in the vital task of understanding and connection. "What you wrote about us, please." The doctor interjected, his voice laced with urgency. "I need you to step back now." The impatience within him ignited a surge of raw emotion within me. My brother needed me standing strong. With determination pooling in my gut, I backed away only slightly, stealing a glimpse of Richard's face, etched with worry. There was too much left unsaid between us, too many years of regret begging for a moment of connection. And suddenly, miraculously, there was kindness amid the turmoil. The nurse, with her quiet courage, leaned closer. "He's a fighter, you know," she assured me softly. "But this moment? It's vital. You getting through to him will make all the difference." Those words ignited a flicker of hope, a swell that shot straight to my core. I nodded, digesting her encouragement. I wiped the tears that threatened to spill, realizing that instead of losing my brother, I could still reach him. But unknown to me, my sister's grip tightened, sensing the weight of choices that hung in the air. Having a brother's love restored mattered more than pride, more than years of anger I had wrapped around myself like armor. I needed to peel it back and uncover what resided beneath. "Richard," I called out. My voice steady despite the chaos. "You are not alone. We have so much to uncover. Just hang on. I'll be here always." His gaze locked onto mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw the flicker of recognition, the shadow of a smile. It felt like a thread stretching out toward me, binding us together once again. Then, the tension in the room shifted, and the machine's beeping softened almost imperceptibly. I found myself holding my breath as I felt Eleanor shift beside me, bewildered and hopeful. But in the unexpected turbulence of relief came another twist, a shadow lurking within the fragile daylight. The door burst open again to reveal the doctor, his expression unreadable as he stepped closer, his brows knit tight. "Liz, there's something we need to discuss concerning Richard's condition," he said, and in that moment, the universe felt poised on a precipice, every heartbeat echoing with dread. Pinpricks of fear tingled up my spine. "What is it?" I demanded, as the weight of anticipation and anguish hung between us, shrouding the room in an uneasy silence. I could taste fate lingering in the air, and the realization that our story wasn't yet finished surged through me. Would it be filled with healing, with the vibrant colors we once painted together? Or would those colors smother under shadows of uncertainty yet to unfold? I braced myself, knowing that the next word spoken could tear open old wounds or weave new beginnings together. Would we step into the day as families reunited, or would we be carried through yet another storm? As the doctor's pronounced warning hung in the air like a dark cloud, I braced myself, clenching the edges of the letter that felt heavier than ever in my fingers. I could see the worry dancing in Eleanor's eyes, mirroring the chaos unfurling within me. What more could fate demand of us? The letter I had so cherishingly held on to now felt like a chain pulling me back, tethering me to the pain of our history rather than leading me toward a path of healing. Richard's prognosis has taken an unexpected turn, the doctor said, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. Each syllable struck with the force of a hammer meeting an anvil, reverberating throughout my mind. He may require immediate surgery to stabilize his condition. Is he going to be okay? I questioned breathlessly. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of nothingness, holding my breath as if it would make the answer less devastating. It's a critical procedure, and while we have a good chance, he paused, measuring his words like a surgeon picking apart delicate flesh. It's not without risks. I just need you to understand that time is of the essence. The words hung between us like a chasm I feared to cross. I looked back at Richard, and the silence in the room turned deafening. In that brief moment, I was swept back into Meadow days spent as children, laughing and trading secrets in the sun-drenched backyard, to the weight of silence that had cloaked us. A mixture of untold dreams and endless regrets swirled within me. No, I whispered, breaking the stillness as despair surged. We can't go. Not like this. The fear bubbled over, threatening to drown out my hope. We have unfinished conversations. Unsaid goodbyes. The doctor softened slightly, his brows still etched with concern. You can talk to him now, but we need to act quickly. Eleanor squeezed my hand tighter, offering warmth in the chill of turmoil. You have to tell him everything, Liz. Everything you've kept inside. The gravity of her words echoed in my heart. If there was a sliver of humanity left connecting us, this was my moment to bridge the years of hesitance and pride. I leaned over Richard, brushing a strand of hair away from his brow, grounding myself in what mattered. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, and I know there's been so through his pain. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner how much you meant to me. I let pride poison what we had. His voice faltered, thick with emotion. In that moment, the hallway echoed with the noise of hurried footsteps and blown-out breaths. But for us, the chaos faded into the background, and the shared forgiveness fell between us like a thick, encompassing fog, enveloping us, and just like that, Richard seemed to be more present, tension releasing from his body as broad strokes of color began intermingling with the muted hues of our turbulent past. But the vibrant connection was precarious, fragile. A sudden alarm erupted, jolting us back into reality. Machines began beeping louder, and I felt my heart drop. I locked eyes with Richard, who seemed almost at peace, a stark contrast to the frantic movement of the medical staff rushing to his side. A sense of dread pricked at my senses. I felt Eleanor stiffen beside me, her breath hitching as she registered the change in atmosphere. What's happening? She gasped, clutching my arm. Only then did I notice the shifting expressions around the room. The concerned frowns on the nurses' faces mirrored back to me like shards of ice. Stay back. We need to stabilize him. The doctor barked, and the nurse at Richard's side quickly initiated a series of procedures that felt too fast. I watched in disarray as they fought to keep him tethered to this world, my heart racing like a drumbeat in my ears. In that moment, the fragile thread we'd begun to mend pulled tight once again, and suddenly, everything felt on the brink of collapse. Would I lose him right when we had begun to heal? Or was this another test of our resolve, a precipice poised before us, bearing the burden of what we had finally acknowledged? With a mix of fear and fierce determination, I whispered into the frantic air, "Come on, Richard. You can't leave me now." The beeping intensified, and the world narrowed to the clinical sounds filling the room. I felt the air thicken as if heavy with some unspeakable weight, a collective breath held as the medical team worked frantically. I gripped Richard's hand, my heart racing, the warmth of it slowly dissipating as though he was slipping through my fingers. Elizabeth. Eleanor's voice came sharp through the haze, pulling me back. We need to step aside. They need space. That I didn't want to lose him. Not now. Not after we had finally begun to touch upon the truths that had haunted us. I caught Eleanor's gaze and saw the plea in her eyes, the need for me to stay strong. She was right, even if every part of me screamed to stay. I stood frozen, a statue of fear and love, but the urgency around Richard propelled me to my feet, away from the chaos unfolding around him. As the team worked, I backed towards the wall, fighting against the sickening tide of despair that threatened to pull me under. I turned my focus to Eleanor, who had been my lifeline since this nightmare began. Do you think? Will he be okay? The question came out broken, hanging between us. Let's hope so, she replied softly, gripping my arm, her presence a calming balm against the tumult. We need to believe in his fight, Liz. Every second that ticked by felt like hours passing without mercy. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to summon the strength I needed, the strength I wanted Richard to feel. He has to fight, I whispered, vibrating with a desperate sincerity. We've only just begun. Almost as if responding to my unspoken prayer, the monitors began stabilizing. The alarming cacophony started to subside, the frantic movement slowing, morphing into a resolute rhythm. A nurse turned toward us, her expression mixture of relief and urgency. He's stabilizing, but we need to take him for the procedure soon. I want to be there, I said, stepping forward instinctively. He needs to know I'm here. The nurse hesitated at my fervency but somehow nodded. In her gaze, I saw a flickering light, a shared understanding that ignited hope within my chest. I was still tethered to Richard, still part of his battle. As they prepared to move him, I squeezed his hand once more, warmth leaching out of my fingers. Fight for me, Richard, I urged, my voice low and steady. I'll be right here. I love you. The gurney rolled away and the doctor looked back at me, his eyes earnest. Stay close. Well, take good care of him. And with that, they disappeared down the gleaming corridor, leaving me standing in the aftermath of fear, uncertainty echoing in the room behind me. Eleanor took my hand and led me to the waiting area, an expanse of cold, sterile walls, the scent of antiseptic a harsh reminder of where we were. The harsh fluorescent lights gave everything an unwelcoming cast, drains of color from my world. I sank into one of the stiff chairs, arms crossed tightly against my chest, feeling the chill creep into my very bones. Liz, do you want some water? Coffee? Eleanor offered, her eyes flitting around the space as if hunting for something to pull us both from the spiral of worry. No, I said, my voice dull and muffled. I need to sit with my thoughts. Just for a moment. She nodded, understanding. The silence enveloped us thick, suffocating, filled with unspoken fears. My thoughts spiraled, each one tugging at a thread of an unfinished conversation, a tapestry woven with memories, regrets, and hopes. That I leaned forward in my chair, staring down at my hands, remembering the last time Richard had visited. The laughter and the jibes were still fresh in my mind, clinking glasses of laughter mingling with warmth as we reminisced about our childhood, all without acknowledging the shadows lurking beneath our banter. I couldn't help but feel the threads of guilt weaving into that fabric, the fabric of our relationship wrapped tightly around lies, misunderstandings, and silent accusations. Do you remember the time we built that tree house? I said, almost to myself. We were so convinced we could make it the best fort in the neighborhood. Eleanor turned her head, her attention focused. I remember. You two fought to see who could climb higher. Richard always won. He used to climb the highest branches while I screamed at him to come down. The laughter bubbled up, bright yet tinged with sadness, a glimpse into the times when trivial things felt so enormous, when the weight between us was just the trivialities of childhood. That I think he loved being the protective big brother, Eleanor remarked, a small smile anchoring her features. And there was a sweetness to that. The memory felt heavy, like a stone lodged behind my ribs. But I pushed him away, I whispered. I didn't see it then, didn't recognize how much his being there meant to me, and, in that realization, a thought struck me. The possibility of surviving this, of breaking the cycle of pain, lay not just in forgiveness but also in understanding how shared distress had twisted us both beyond the mirror of our childhood selves. The minutes stretched and still we sat in silence until finally, the doors to the surgery waiting room opened with a quiet whoosh, and the doctor stepped inside. My heart seized in my chest as he looked at me, pressing his lips tightly into a line. "Liz," he began carefully, "the surgery went as well as it could have, but an unexpected tremor rippled through my body." There was a weight hidden in those simple words. "But?" I echoed, breath-catching. "He's awake, but we need to monitor him. I need you to be prepared for what you'll find, he's not out of the woods yet." The doctor's tone was measured yet filled with a caution I hadn't anticipated. Reality pressed down around me, the gravity of uncertainty washing over like a tidal wave. I forced myself to nod, but every word he spoke seemed to deepen a chasm within me. Would my brother acknowledge me, see me as I truly was as he fought to hold on? I felt Eleanor's steady hand on my shoulder, grounding me as I steeled myself for what was to come. "What do you want to do?" she asked softly as I rose to my feet. "That I want to see him. I need him to know I'm here." As I stepped past the threshold of that waiting area, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of everything that had once been unspoken between us. The distance that had stretched back over decades had come to a head to die, a moment surging with unyielding hope yet grasping fearfully at the whispers of what tomorrow may hold. In that space, everything felt possible, but only if Richard chose to fight, as I was beginning to realize, he had always done for me. As I approached Richard's room, each step felt heavier than the last, as if I were walking against a tide of emotions. Eleanor's presence beside me was a comforting buoy, but I still felt lost in the enormity of what lay ahead. The sterile hallways echoed with hurried footsteps and the rhythmic beeping of machines, a stark reminder of life clinging precariously to the edges of hope. When I reached his room, I paused at the door. The air was thick, the tension palpable. The nurse offered a warm smile as she stepped out, giving me a silent nod of encouragement. I took a breath, gathered my strength, and pushed the door open. There he was, lying against the sheets, a fragile shadow of the man I had known, and yet, somehow still unmistakably him. The machines around him hummed softly, measuring every breath, every heartbeat, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside had faded entirely. It was just us, lost in the silence of years lost. "Richard," I whispered, my voice trembling. I stepped inside the room, tearing my gaze away from the machines to focus squarely on him. The dim light bounced off his skin, illuminating the weariness etched into his features, lines of struggle that seemed to tell our story better than any words could express. His eyelids fluttered open slowly, revealing those familiar, soft eyes that had always held a spark of mischief. Yet now there was a vulnerability that gripped my heart. "Liz?" His voice came out cracked and fragile, like thin glass waiting to shatter. "I am here," I assured him, moving closer, needing him to feel my presence wrapping around him like a warm embrace. "I'm here, and I love you." His brows knitted together in a mix of surprise and something deeper, perhaps regret. "I'm sorry for everything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but it grounded me. Here was the moment I had both dreaded and yearned for. "No," I breathed, tears shimmering in my eyes as I rushed to his side. "I'm the one who should be sorry. For years, I let anger blind me. I want to fix this. I want to forgive. I want you back in my life." Each word felt like a thread weaving connections back to the boy who had been my anchor through childhood, the brother who had been lost in the noise of unresolved argument. Richard's gaze softened, but still, I could see the tremor of pain etched in his slight frame. "You don't understand," he started, but I interrupted him gently. "No, I do. I think I finally do. I spent too many years holding on to the hurt, letting it morph into something ugly, but all it did was cage me. I don't want to live like that anymore. Please, let's promise to be better together." He studied my face for what felt like an eternity, searching for something, perhaps, a semblance of truth beneath the turmoil. Then he nodded slightly, a wave of relief washing across his features. "Okay." Just that simple word poured warmth into my chilled heart. But before we could bask in the glow of our reunion, the doctor entered, clipboard in hand and a solemn look in his eyes. Richard is still on a strict recovery protocol, but he's stable enough for visitors. We'll need to monitor him closely, though. Eleanor's hand brushed against mine as I glanced back at Richard. There was a heaviness in the doctor's gaze that reminded me of the fragility we were holding. Let's talk more after visiting hours, he added. Do you have any idea how long he has to stay? I asked quickly, fear creeping in. The doctor sighed thoughtfully. It depends on how his body responds post-surgery, but I assure you, we're doing everything we can. He exited, leaving the somber weight of his words behind. Richard's face had shifted to one of uncertainty, and I could feel it radiating through the room. Liz, what if no? I cut him off, more forcefully than I intended. We're not doing that. No what ifs. We're focusing on getting through today, together. I reached for his hand, entwining my fingers through his. It felt right, grounding in a way I needed more than I realized. For a moment, the silence cocooned us as we absorbed this newfound bonded connection that had been severed but was now beginning to thread itself back together, always present but neglected until this moment. And then I noticed the envelope tucked beneath the pillow, the same worn paper I had clutched earlier like a lifeline. Richard, I found your letter, I said softly, bringing it out and unfolding it carefully. His eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and something akin to melancholy flashing across his features. That I didn't think you'd ever read it, he replied, almost embarrassed. It's beautifully written, and it made me realize just how much regret we've both harbored. It's time we shed the past like a snake sheds its skin, don't you think? He nodded, taking a deep breath before responding. I always wanted to apologize for the hurt. I wanted to do it differently, but I didn't know how. Maybe we can start by just being honest moving forward, I said softly, squeezing his hand. Let's not let fear dictate our relationship anymore. No more silence. It's a deal. Richard squeezed back, a glimmer of determination shining through the weariness. The rest of the afternoon slipped away in soft whispers and laughter as we reminisced about our childhood. A tentative but growing warmth enveloped the room as if trying to dispel the shadows of the past with each passing moment. Our laughter danced through the air, serenading the pain still fresh in our hearts, yet reassuring us that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back home. That I and the moments shared, a bond began to weave itself anew, vibrant and real, tethered by the understanding that we would face our demons together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues in the room, I knew we weren't simply piecing together the past, we were setting the foundation for our future. Promise me you'll fight, Richard, I said earnestly, my heart swelling with newfound hope. Because I'm not ready to lose you again. Not now. That he looked at me then, recognition dawning in his eyes. I promise, he whispered, a tender smile breaking through as exhaustion settled in around us like a protective cloak. But then, a surprising realization struck, casting everything in a new light. The unfurling journey of forgiveness had transformed not just our relationship, but me as well. I finally saw the gift tucked beneath the layers of anguish. We had both been mirrors reflecting the other, and in our struggle, we were learning the transformative power of love. That I love you, Liz. His voice, though softened by fatigue, resonated with warmth, carrying both promise and vulnerability. That I love you too, Richard. Always, I replied, feeling the weight of those words settle within me. In that moment, something shifted. Forgiveness didn't absolve our hurt, it liberated us from it. The bonds that had felt so fragile now felt stronger than the past we had carried. The heavy weight no longer an anchor but a launch pad. As twilight embraced us, I leaned closer, resting my head next to his, comforted by the heartbeat that still pulsed, synchronized with mine. And as the darkness melted away, I felt a warmth encircle us, illuminating the path forward, a path lined with colors of hope we were finally uncovering together. Together, we would create a new narrative, a tapestry woven not only with love and laughter but also with the forgiveness that had eluded us for far too long. And with that final thought, the weight of my heart lifted, breathing warmth into spaces that once felt unyielding. We were no longer just siblings caught in the undertow of silence, we had become each other's rhythm in the dance of life. In the depths of that night, as we surrendered to the moment, I realized, unequivocally, that forgiveness isn't just about letting go, it's about reclaiming love where it was once lost. And there, in that hospital room, we found not only our way back to each other, but a way forward together. That night, as I drifted into a peaceful slumber beside my brother, I knew that in the end, sometimes the most unbelievable power lies not just in forgiveness, but in the simple act of remembering to love.